Hi everybody, this is Anne. Whether it's sloppy scraps from the bottom of your clay bucket or the slivers that fall from our carving tools, all potters are faced with the dilemma of what to do with those pesky clay leftovers. In this video, Jim and I will demonstrate a unique way to use those scraps. We'll show you how we use slips and carved clay slivers for unique textures and patterns. This first technique Jim dubbed the seed slivers. We were inspired to do this technique from the pieces we created in the video, Carving Ideas for Pottery, where we brushed alternating layers of slip and underglaze over several wheel-thrown pieces, then carved through the layers. To see the detailed instructions, check out the link above. We were so focused on the negative parts of the patterns we were carving into the pot, but when we looked down at all the clay we had carved away, they were the coolest little ringed slivers and patterned strips. Both of us were thinking that there has to be some way to use those to decorate with. And here's Jim's idea of what to do with them. I rolled out and ribbed a 1/4-inch slab of clay, then traced a mug template to the center of the slab to give me an idea of where to do the decorating. I also included a 1/2-inch clearance at the top and the bottom for stretching and for a rim and foot for hand building. I didn't cut through the clay at this point. I also rolled out a separate 1/8-inch slab alternating those same layers of slip and straight underglaze and let them dry to a cheese leather hard. Using the Diamondcore P2 tool, Jim began to carve through the layers of underglaze and clay, creating those pattern ringed slivers. He then randomly placed them onto the slab where I traced. One thing he discovered was that if the black layer of slip smeared when he carved through it, then the clay needed to dry more before proceeding. He used a heat gun to speed up the process a little. Once the little seeds were placed where he wanted them, I removed the separate layered slab, then took a very clean rolling pin and rolled it over the seeds so the slivers adhered and were flat to the surface. I went slowly to make sure the black slipped layers didn't smear into the rolling pin or onto the clay. I made several passes to assure me of the adherence. As the rolling process stretched and distorted the original traced lines, I replaced the template over the decorated clay, retraced the lines, then cut it out completely. Now it's ready for construction. Check out the video Making the Perfect Hand-Built Mug to see detailed instructions for doing this. I wrapped the slab snugly around a plastic-wrapped carpet tube. I then cut, scored, slipped, and gently attached the seam. I then attached a foot utilizing the wheel and extruded a handle to create this mug. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications if you want to see the glazed version of this in the community section. Next, I'll show you how to use the sloppy clay dregs for this next technique. I scooped out the wet clay from the bottom of my reclaim bucket. I used an immersion blender to smooth it all out, and I alternated adding water and blending until I had a creamy yogurt consistency. For this project, I thought I'd experiment with an alternative to brushing layers of expensive underglaze. I scooped out a cup of the smooth slip and mixed 3 tablespoons of black underglaze to it and mixed it well. I rolled out an 1/8 of an inch slab and ribbed it. I then brushed the colored slip onto the surface with a fan brush. As you can see, it goes on thick. used a heat gun to dry the slip until there was just a hint of wet shine. I cut the slab in half and layered it one over top of the other. I then cut the strip again and layered those together for a very primitive version of the elegant Japanese decorating technique of narikomi. I decided to do one more cut and stack for a total of 8 slab slip layers. I then dropped them on the mat several times to get them to stick together without sliding. As I kept getting the black slip on my fingers from that top layer, it dawned on me that I could roll a separate 1/8 inch slab and cover that top black layer. Duh! Now I could roll my rolling pin over the layers for adherence or to stretch it out if I wanted. I then used a straight edge to cut away the jagged edges. I also used it to cut the pieces into 4 parts. Now when I turned the cube stacks upright, I could see the distinct layers. And look what happens when I turn 2 of the stacks sideways. I like that pattern. I attach the cubes together and braid them down on the top to flatten them out. I found that when I manipulated the sides of the cane, I got more funky patterns when I cut through it. I'll set this cane aside so it can dry a little more before using it. Now here's a separate cane I made a couple days ago. It's dry enough that I can cut through it and the black underglaze will not smear, so I know it's ready to use. I rolled out and ribbed a 1/4 inch slab and traced the mug template on the surface, just like we did with the first project. I then used a sharp paring knife to cut thin layers from the layered cane. I placed those on a 1/4 inch slab. For this pattern, I rolled several pieces to the surface at a time to gauge stretching before placing more pieces on the surface. I also had a separate cane which I manipulated into a funky line pattern. This added a little variety to the straight lines. It would have been fun to play around with an alternate color for one of the canes too. I kept slicing and rolling until I was happy with the pattern. It was then ready for construction. Now here's the mug I created with that slab. As you can see, the slip wasn't as dark as using straight underglaze, but I still like the contrast. Now here's a finished piece I did with an alternate version of that same pattern. Finally, here's a simple technique that Xiem is calling the 70s pants pattern. I created the stacked strips like the last project, but I left the layered strips long, not cubed. I used a straight edge and paring knife to cut thin strips from the stack. I then placed them along the slab at the top edge like this. I used my finger to press down and upward to create ripples in the lines. I then used the rolling pin to flatten and adhere it to the surface. I continued slicing the stacks and adhering them to the surface. Now here's the mug I created with that slab. Now we have just scratched the surface, pardon the pun, of all the ways you can stack and cut these layers to decorate your pottery. I hope this video inspires you to not be so quick to throw away all your clay scraps. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. I'll see you next time in the studio. Duh!